My name's Kerry Trow. I am the product owner for Twinkl Symbols, and today we're going to discuss everything EAL, what symbols are and how they can be used to best support your EAL learners, either in the classroom, at home, in the community setting, wherever you might be. Okay, so during the course of the afternoon, we're going to have a think about what is EAL, what challenges do EAL learners face, and then we're going to have a little look at symbols. So what are symbols and how can they be used to support your EAL learners? And then we're going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and we're going to have a look at some quick win strategies that you can put into place, whether that be in the home, in the classroom, to support your EAL learners. So hopefully there will be lots of strategies and ideas for you to take away with you. You will also receive a PDF of the slides, and all of the resources that I will mention during the afternoon will be linked in there as well. So you will have all of that to take away with you today. Okay, so first of all, what is EAL? So the DFE state that a pupil is recorded as having English as an additional language if she or he is exposed to a language at home that is known or believed to be other than English. The statistics for last year, so for 2022 to 23, state that 20.2% of all pupils in England were recorded as having a first language known or believed to be other than English, which is an increase from the 21-22 data that they have, which shows that continuing trend of increases in the number of EAL learners that we have in our classrooms. This equates to about 1.8 million EAL learners in England alone. So it's quite likely that you will have EAL learners in your classes. Obviously, in certain parts of the country, there may be a higher percentage of EAL learners within the school community, but yeah, across England, it is 1.8 million EAL learners. So it is something that we need to be ready for as teachers. So looking at the statutory guidance around this, so within the national curriculum for 2014, it states teachers must take account of the needs of pupils whose first language is not English. And then in 4.6, it says that the ability of pupils for whom English is an additional language to take part in the national curriculum may be in advance of the communication skills in England. And as a consequence, teachers should plan teaching opportunities to help those pupils develop their English and aim to provide the support that those pupils need to take part in all subjects. This also comes up within the teacher standards, which states that it is the responsibility of all teachers. So it's not just the SENCO, it's not just whoever's designated for EAL within school. It is a responsibility of all teachers, whatever the subject, to adapt their teaching to the strengths and needs of all people. And they go into a little bit more detail in Standard 5, which says that teachers should have a clear understanding of the needs of all pupils, including those with special educational needs, those of high ability, those with English as an additional language, those with disabilities, and be able to use and evaluate distinctive teaching approaches to support and engage them. So in a nutshell, it is everybody's responsibility. So with that in mind, it really pays to have a few strategies up your sleeve in order to provide them with the best learning opportunities that you can. So pupils learning English as an additional language, the EAL, share many common characteristics with pupils whose first language is English. They're learners at the end of the day. So many of the characteristics that they share will be characteristics of all learners across the board. However, these pupils also have distinct and different needs from other pupils by the virtue of the fact that they are learning in and through an additional language whilst also learning that language. So they've got quite a lot of challenges. You know, learning is difficult anyway, but you know, there are lots of additional barriers potentially for our EAL learners. In addition, they may come from cultural backgrounds and communities with different understandings and expectations of education, language, and learning. So it's an awful lot, you know, for those learners that have come from different countries and you know, have arrived in your schools and settings. You know, it's an awful lot for them to overcome, and you know that the challenges are there. However, I hasten to add that the question, does EAL mean SEN? so special educational needs. The Education Act in 1981 states that children should not be categorised as having a special educational need solely because they speak another language other than English at home. So as with any other learner, an EAL learner may have additional needs, additional learning needs, but this is not solely because of their language needs. Okay, so if you don't mind, I would be grateful if you could pop in the chat some responses to this question. So in your experience, in your opinion, what challenges do EAL learners face? Just give you a minute or so just to pop something in the chat if you're happy to, and then we'll take a little dive into that a little bit deeper. So yeah, the language barrier, yeah, that's a given, I think, for most EAL learners. Anything else? Anything else that an EAL learner might find difficult within the school environment, about learning, about resources? Yeah, understanding is definitely one. Anything else at all? No experience of going to the UK and school in the UK before? Yeah, definitely. I'll mention that in just a second. There can be some cultural differences, which can obviously be very new to children. Expressing themselves, absolutely. Isolation, cultural context, grammar, social barrier, needing visuals, yeah, accents, absolutely. So, you know, there's an awful lot going on for our EAL learners, especially when they're very new to English British schools and, you know, our education system. So we're going to have a little look into that now. So in a nutshell, we have social and cultural differences, social and cultural challenges, but we also have language and learning challenges. But first of all, we're going to have a look at the social and cultural challenges, many of which you have already mentioned in the chat, which is fab. So newcomers may feel really isolated and confused in school, especially if they've got varying experiences of school and of learning and education settings. You know, education can look very different across the world, and expectations can be very different. Children may arrive with having started school at different ages, so they might have different experiences of education. They might have been in school for varying amounts of time. Unfamiliar class routines can make adaptation difficult. You know, you might have might come from a country where it's education's quite formal, or you might come from a country where, you know, children don't start sort of formal education until they're much older. So yeah, it's about those expectations and what the children, you know, how the children work on a day-to-day basis. And language barriers can lead to communication challenges and isolation, which somebody else also mentioned. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine going to a new country where I didn't speak the language and feeling quite isolated, you know, not necessarily knowing what was going on from minute to minute across a school day, or, you know, what the expectations are, sort of behaviourally or academically. Yeah, so there's a lot to deal with. And that's before you even get into the language and learning challenges. So there can be stereotypes which may limit opportunities for minority ethnic students. You know, it might be that you know, certain sectors of the community are perceived as learning a particular way, or yeah, so there might be different educational approaches that they might be unfamiliar to students from other countries. Again, I mentioned, you know, being sort of more formal learners or not. Language used in learning may contain unfamiliar terms and concepts. And that's a really important one, because not only are they learning a language, but they're also learning day-to-day language, and they're also learning academic language as well, which can be, you know, two different entities really. Rightly or wrongly, EAL students may be grouped with low achieving, and this could limit their exposure to good English role models, you know, and working with a variety of children and adults across the setting. So that can be a challenge. And differences in alphabets and signs across languages can pose reading and writing challenges. You know, you might have sort of, you know, your more European languages might share most of the same alphabets, but, you know, if you go further afield, the alphabets can be very, very different, or you might have languages where they use symbols to represent whole sentences or concepts rather than just single words, as in the English language. Okay, so we're going to have a little think about symbols now. So symbols are all around us and we all use them every day. Very visual form of communicating information. They give us that information really quickly and without the need for lots of text that we may or may not understand. I mean, I'd be pretty certain that if I put you into any country, you know, far-flung corner of the world, if you saw any of the symbols on screen there, you would be able to have a good guess at what they meant because they are that universal language. So they're a way of visually representing a word or a concept. They're often very iconic and remove the need to understand abstract letters and words. I mean, with those symbols there, you know, you've got a telephone and it shows a telephone. You've got the symbol there, the disabled symbol, where, you know, it shows somebody in a wheelchair. So it gives you a really quick, concise way of conveying that information. So it's not restricted by language or nationality or a person's ability to read. They're a very useful support as they're concrete and unchanging. You know, if you saw that symbol, it wouldn't change. You know, if I spoke the word telephone, then as soon as I've said it, the word has gone. But it's something that we can refer back to. And sometimes having that time can really help a learner to process and understand what's being communicated. Symbols allow time to process information. So you can refer back to it. It gives you that time to think about and understand without having to get caught up in translating the written word. Obviously, you know, we're not saying that we don't want our EAL learners to learn to read and to write English. Of course we do, but it takes away that language barrier and that demand, you know, in a context where that's not important. You know, it's the learning rather than the actual translation of the language at that point. And our symbols are carefully designed in sets to give them a consistent visual structure, which reduces the interpretation demand. So when we're supporting EAL learners, we're not trying to reduce the cognitive demands necessarily, unless that's appropriate for that learner, but we are reducing the interpretation demands. So again, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, how can symbols support EAL learners? In your experience, in your opinion, how can they be useful? Give you a minute just to pop something in there, and then we'll have a little deep dive into that. Yeah, can be used as visuals. Yeah, they're absolutely key as visual supports for our learners. Yeah, so it just links meaning to words that may not make sense, absolutely, to express how they're feeling. Yeah, these are all great. Being able to communicate. Okay, just out of interest, can people just give me a show of hands, you know, perhaps putting a thumb up if they have supported EAL learners with symbols? Yeah, fab. So there's a good few of you. That's lovely. Okay. So hopefully not all of this will come as new information, but hopefully you'll get perhaps a little nugget of something that you weren't familiar with before. We've also got often easy to process than verbal. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's have a look. So how do symbols help children to learn? Symbols are permanent, which I've mentioned before. So they are that visual support that a child can refer back to. They're not changing. And you know, it's something that can be alongside a piece of work, or it can be in the environment as that constant reminder of the information they're trying to convey. The next one about symbols being consistent. This is really, really critical. We could use visual supports to support EAL learners. So we could use photographs, we could use drawings, we could use illustrations. However, if you've got two different settings, perhaps a home and a classroom setting, or, you know, even across different parts of the school, you know, if you had a photograph of perhaps, I don't know, a cat, people might choose a different photograph. So, you know, a child might learn that, you know, a photograph alongside of an activity that includes a cat is one thing, but then if they're showing a picture of a different cat in a different context, it might just confuse. But the idea with symbols is that the images are used consistently, and it is a vocabulary, and that consistency, sorry, helps children to make the links between their home language, the picture, and also the new language that they're learning, which is English. Sorry. As I mentioned before, symbols allow time to process information. Symbols can prepare learners for transitions. So I'll show you some resources in just a little while that can help the transition between one activity or another, or one room, or one resource or another for our students. They can help learners grasp nuances of language because they are so iconic. They quite often reflect the word or the concept that we're trying to convey. You know, the word faster or slower might be quite abstract, but if you showed them a picture or a symbol, sorry, that illustrated that concept, it might be, you know, a little bit easier to understand. It can help build confidence and independence if you're able to present alongside a task. It might give a child the ability to complete the task with more independence, because they wouldn't have to ask for support around the language, that they could follow the instructions or answer the question that had been set, you know, or even finding their way to the library or the dinner hall. You know, they would be able to do that with more independence and confidence. And linked to that, it can also help to reduce anxiety and stress. You know, I mean, if you're in a foreign city, perhaps if you're on holiday, and you're not sure quite how to get to, you know, your hotel, it can be really stressful, you know, with the language barrier, if you're not able to understand the written text that's in the environment. If you have pictures or symbols alongside that, it instantly reduces the anxiety and the stress that those situations can cause. And lastly, at the bottom, symbols only include relevant information, so they can be really useful in just sort of honing in on what we're trying to convey to a learner. So, you know, we're not overwhelming them with all the information that they don't need. We're just keeping it to keywords and things, which can really, really help with their understanding. Okay, so using symbols with EAL learners. So learners who have not yet developed a full grasp of English will find interpreting both written and verbal language a challenge. And this can impact learners in every part of school life. So it could be coming in and registering in the morning. It can be finding your way to the PE cupboard. It could be completing a task at your desk. You know, there's lots and lots of different ways that having challenges around written and verbal language can impact your day in school. But symbols can help to bridge the gap between languages. So putting symbols alongside English text can help to support a learner's understanding of the words and provide context to the learning. So as I said before, we're not trying to hinder that understanding of the English written word or spoken word, but it's just that bridge between the two. So I've got an apple on screen there. So it might be someone that has French as a home language, that you know, they would use the French words to describe that. But by having the apple symbol and the apple word alongside it, it's bridging the gap between the two. So you might not understand that the words, that the letters A-P-P-L-E spell out apple, or you might not have the confidence to speak it, but it would give you that bridging between the image and the word to give it, you know, some context to the understanding. Okay, so there is a growing body of evidence to show that memory consists of two separate channels, the verbal and the visual channel. So we've got the image on screen there. And the research is that if we can link the verbal or the text input together with the graphical, so what you can see, the learning really sticks. And I know, having moved house a few years ago and having to put together flat pack furniture, you know, diagrams really help. And this is for all learners, I think. You know, the instructions could have been written in any other language, but with the the images alongside that, I instantly got the grasp of what I was being expected to do. You know, and if I thought about it, then I could link that to the text within the instructions. So the use of visuals benefit all learners, not just those with EAL. Visuals such as symbols are useful for making the curriculum accessible for EAL learners and providing context to learning. So this reduces the language demands of a task without reducing the cognitive demands, which I mentioned earlier. So symbols can be used to support a vocabulary, can help with learning new words, and help to separate the understanding of concepts from decoding spelling. So you notice on that resource that I put down there, which is a science investigation resource, by presenting the symbols above each of the words, children can begin to make the links between the symbols and the written words. So it's not that we're trying to discourage the reading of English text, but we are making those links between the visuals and the text there. Visuals also provide a means of communicating understanding between the learner and teacher. So it's not just about the students sitting down and being able to understand the task, but it's also about communicating that on the other side. So at a basic level, learners that struggle to communicate verbally could point to a symbol to make a choice, to indicate how they're feeling, or to make a request. At a higher level, learners could use symbols to demonstrate their thinking. They could use symbols to record completed work, perhaps answering questions, or matching things or filling the gap. They could organise their thoughts, so they could sequence things, they could summarise their learning, and they can also share that with others. So it's not just about understanding, but it's also a communicative tool as well. Okay, so a little look now at Twinkl Symbols and what we offer before I then go on to discuss some strategies that we can that you can use to support your EAL learners. So Twinkl Symbols is a collection of products that offer professionally designed and illustrated symbols-based resources and digital tools that can support children with SEND and speech language communication needs. So we've got 3 different product lines within Twinkl Symbols. We've got the Twinkl Symbols resources. So this is an extensive range of ready-made and ready-to-print symbolised resources linked to the curriculum and everyday situations. We've got the Twinkl Symbols web tool, which is a web-based tool where you can create your own bespoke symbolised resources using our bank of over 2,000 symbols and 150 templates. And we've got the Twinkl Symbols for AAC app, which is a mobile app that facilitates communication and access on the go. So I'm going to refer to mostly resources, but occasionally the web tool and the AAC app as we go through. And as I mentioned, the PDF that you will get at the end of, in the next few days, will have all of the resources linked as well. Okay, so we're going to have a little look now at some of the ways in which you can support your EAL learners, and where possible, I've included links to resources that we have on site. And as I said, they are all linked. So when you get your PDF, you should just be able to click on the image or the title underneath, and it will take you straight to those resources. So when welcoming new children and families to school, it's important to build relationships, and an induction to into school can be a good place to start. So it's about making children and their families and carers feel really welcome in the school setting. So we've got the My New School Transition booklet. So you can see there you've got symbols on each page, which take them through their journey into their new school and what they can expect. We've also got the All About Me booklet. So we've got, I've just got one page on there, things I like and things I am good at. So this can be a really nice introduction to class and also to finding out about them and what they like. You know, you can see if there's any common interests within pupils in your school. And you've got the symbols there that they can choose from. So even if communication is quite limited, you know, you could give them the symbol selection cards there to choose from, and perhaps try to communicate things that are important to them, or you know, that's something that they could complete at home and bring in, on their first visit into school to share with you. Social and cultural challenges, making school life more visual. So the school environment can easily be adapted to support our EAL learners. The addition of symbols to signage can help learners to become more familiar with and begin to navigate their new surroundings. As I mentioned before, just landing in a new school can be really daunting for an English-speaking people, but with those additional barriers around language and communication can be really difficult. But by signposting the environment, different rooms, cupboards and drawers, learners will begin to develop an understanding of where different people, resources and facilities can be found. And we hope that by enabling them to understand a little bit more about their environment, they will be able to carry out simple tasks more independently or find their way around the school a little bit more easily. So we've got the classroom area display posters there. So we've got the large symbols with the text underneath, which could be placed around your classroom, around your school. And we've also got the classroom labels there as well. So you could label your drawers, much as you would probably in most classrooms anyway. But by having the symbol alongside it, it means that, if you asked a child to go and collect a pencil, they would be able to do that, or they might be able to collect what they needed for a lesson and then return it to the appropriate places. So helping them to settle in and to feel more responsible for themselves and their own learning. Then we move on to visual timetables. Now, as I mentioned before, all of these visuals, they are not just for learners with SEND or with EAL, but they are all resources that can be used with all children. Most classrooms now, certainly primary classrooms, have some kind of visual timetable, whether that uses pictures or symbols or whether it's just words. But they are really nice things to have in your classrooms. So by adding symbols to whole class or individual timetables can further support your EAL learners to understand the sequence of activities for the day. This can help learners to get a sense of what is coming in the day ahead and possibly where they need to go. Not so much in a primary, but if you've got a secondary, moving from class to class or department to department, it can give them that support around that. So at the bottom there, we've got a now and next. And now and next might not be used for all of your learners, but if you do have perhaps younger children or you have learners that do have additional needs, and now and next reduces their timetable down to just what they're doing now and what's going to happen next. And that you can add your symbols in there and rotate them as needed across the different activities. You've got a daily routine, so a schedule at the top of the screen there with all of your days of the week symbols. So you would add your days of the week to the left-hand side of that resource, and then you would add your sequence of lessons or activities down the right side, and then you could either take them off as they complete them, or you could tick where it says finished. So again, it gives them that visual of, okay, we're going outside to play next, and then we're going on the computer. Without having to worry about listening and translating the verbal instructions that they're being given or the written instructions, but it might just help them to make the links between the words and the symbols, but also what's expected of them in that moment. You've also got daily tasks and routines as well that can be symbolised. We've got one there for brushing your teeth. We've also got washing your hands and having a shower and things on site. Obviously, they're not perhaps as appropriate. So certainly the shower for school, but for home use, you've got your symbol for each of the steps, and then you've got your written instruction underneath. So it can just be that visual support to work their way through a task that perhaps they wouldn't fully understand if they were given it as verbal instructions. Inclusive classroom environment. So valuing language diversity is essential in celebrating equality and diversity within the classroom. And incorporating multilingual displays can be a wonderful way to create a welcoming and inclusive environment for our EAL learners. These displays send positive messages to parents, carers and students, emphasising the importance of embracing cultural and language diversity. The placement of symbols alongside home languages and English can enhance such displays and provide that commonality or bridge between the different languages shown. So at the top there, we have a poster, which is a Twinkl poster, but it's got different languages on there. You've got Welsh, you've got sign language, you've got Arabic and Italian, but perhaps having symbols included within those displays would be really useful too. Again, it's just making that commonality between the different display materials. So you might create a display on whatever your topic for the term might be. I mean, it might be plants, it might be mini beasts, it might be the Romans, but having some kind of symbolization on there can help EAL learners that perhaps won't or can't access fully, you know, the rest of the text, but it might pick out those keywords for them that they can become familiar with. So the symbol there for hello, I've included. I created that using our symbols web tool. So there is a link within that slide, but if you just go onto the Twinkl website and type in the Twinkl Symbols web tool, it will come up. And basically, it's a really easy to use digital tool, online tool, where you can create your own symbols. So you could put in, I don't know, if you were doing a topic on mini beasts, you could print off symbols with the different mini beasts on it. So there's lots of templates on there. So you just click on your cell, you search for your symbol, and then it will add it to the cell for you. And then you can save and download those ready to print. Now you can put in the English words onto those symbols that you're creating yourself, but you can also make them dual language. So you could add in English labels and home language labels as well, which might be a really, really nice way of helping to EAL learners to feel valued and included within their classroom environment, you know, if they're seeing that familiar language around them as well. So the Twinkl Symbols web tool is really great if you want to have a look at that at some point. But yeah, there's loads of different templates on there, so you can create all kinds of resources. So setting and communicating expectations. So settling into a new country, culture and learning environment can be difficult. And learners, particularly if they're facing language difficulties and challenges, may need support to understand what is expected of them. Once words are spoken, they disappear, which means that children with limited vocabulary can easily miss what has been said. Without a tangible prompt to help them recall the information that has been given verbally, there is an increased risk that a learner will misunderstand and become frustrated or act in a way, you know, according to their misunderstandings. They might do something because that's what they think was communicated when actually it was something different. So it might be inappropriate, seen as being inappropriate. The use of visual prompts such as symbols can provide an additional layer of support in communicating and understanding the information that is being shared with them, such as in a set of class rules or instructions around behaviour. So you've got there at the top, you've got your class rules. So again, we've got the symbols plus the text alongside, and these could be referred to, you know, whilst you're teaching. You know, you could indicate good sitting, good looking, kind hands. And we've also got the communication fan cards as well. So, you know, if you didn't have that to hand, you could have a set of those perhaps in your pocket that you could refer to, you know, whilst you're out on the playground or something like that. But it just gives that visual. So even if they're not fully understanding what you're saying to them, they've got that visual which they can refer to, which should give them an indication of what the expectation is. We've also got there the adult lanyard visuals. Some of the symbols are similar, but those are a bigger pack of lanyard cards that you can print off and laminate and attach to your lanyards, which, you know, you could have access to across the day, about expectations, about safety and that kind of thing. So those are really, really great resources that you can just have in your pocket or on your lanyard, which is great in supporting in those unplanned for moments, perhaps where you need to communicate something quickly. Survival vocabulary is something that's really, really essential to develop with our EAL learners. Supporting EAL learners to communicate their feelings, their basic wants and needs is so important, particularly during the early days when their ability to communicate in English can be limited. Similised resources can help to support this communication and interaction with others, as it provides them with the visual images that they will likely be familiar with to point to or choose from. So at the top there, we've got basic needs and wants AAC mat. So it's a communication board or an AAC mat, which has a range of symbols there. So we've got I need help, more, finish, toilet, nappy, hurt, snack, drink. So all of those things that a learner might need to communicate quickly, or you know, express to an adult to have their needs met. So you could have that. You could have one in the classroom. You could have a smaller one that you carry around with you. You know, for those individuals where they don't perhaps have the confidence to use English yet, or they don't have the skills at that point to do so. But you know, if you showed them that board, then they could point potentially to communicate what they want or what's wrong in that moment. And we've also got the I need lanyard insert cards there as well. So they are, again, something that could be carried around with you. You know, I need quiet time, I need a drink, I need to talk to you. So again, it doesn't rely on them having to use their voice, although we're not stopping them using their voice, but it gives them a way of communicating in those moments where perhaps they don't want to or they can't verbally. And then at the bottom, we've got the I am feeling communication board. So, you know, you could use it as a board with the smaller symbols cut up. So, you know, you could offer a range of symbols to a child and get them to pick one to communicate to you how they're feeling. You could add that to the main base board there if that's what you wanted to do, or you could just have the symbols up on the wall. So, you know, if they were feeling sad or if they were feeling poorly, that they could go and communicate that to you. So, you know, in essence, the survival vocabulary is just that. It's about getting them through the day and communicating what they need or want when perhaps they don't have the verbal language to do so. Supporting communication. So moving on slightly from that survival vocabulary. Symbol core boards and communication boards can be used to support expressive communication, particularly in the early days when confidence in speaking English can be low. Communication boards allow supporting adults to model language verbally or using the symbols themselves, and also extend a learner's language. So you've got the Twinkl Symbols core board at the top of the page there. So an adult could model pointing, perhaps I like, and then something else, or, you know, pointing to something in the environment, or I want finished, or I want more. So an adult might actually use that themselves and then support the child to do so. I mean, it's not that we would expect them to communicate like this forever, but it might be that middle ground where they do have that visual support, they do have the support of the core board. But again, we're exposing them to hearing the words as we model it, and we're also exposing them to an adult building up the words. So in terms of literacy skills, how we build up words to make a sentence, for example. I mean, you could, I think I refer to this in a few slides, but, you know, you could cut up the symbols so that they can rearrange them to make their own sentences. They're seeing how language is structured as well as hearing it and having an adult model it. We've also got the conversations board pack there. So what did I do at school today? So it might be that these are shared with home. You know, if you've got parents that equally don't have an awful lot of English or understanding of written or verbal English, that it might be a nice way of sharing between home and school. So what did I do in school today, and what did I do at the weekend? So having a board in school for reporting about what they did at the weekend, and a board at home to communicate what they did in school that day might be helpful. And again, you know, the child can either point to the symbols and have an interaction in their home language, or they might, with parents, or they might, you know, develop the confidence over time to use the English words alongside that. Going back to the core board, we can also use things such as the core board to model and extend language. So if a child either verbally or using symbols communicated, "I see a car," then you could model that back, extending the statement to perhaps include a colour or another adjective. So "I see a red car," and this is how they begin to see that language builds. You know, having that symbol support, but also seeing the words alongside them as well. For understanding language, as each symbol represents a single word or concept, which is what I was saying before, they are great building blocks and can really help EAL learners to see how language is structured. So individual words or symbols can be given to a learner to compose their own sentence, either using flashcards, you know, so you could cut up a number of symbolized words and get them to rearrange to create their own sentence using flashcards, or you can use that, do that digitally using the Twinkl Symbols for AAC app. So I've got a screenshot of that on the bottom right there. So it would have been a bit tricky to show you the whole sequence of that on screen. But on that page there, you've got a number of sentence starters, which you click, and then it the symbol is placed down onto the orange sentence bar at the bottom. And then along the right, you've got different topic pages. So if you click into each of the topic pages, all of the topic vocabulary will be displayed. So if perhaps you wanted to say, I don't know, "I need the toilet," then you would click on "I need." You would then find an appropriate page for the toilet symbol and add that in. And then at the bottom left of that orange sentence bar, there's a speak function as well. So not only can you build up your sentences, but it can also read it aloud. So that's great for modelling for a child who then might attempt to have a go at saying it themselves. But if they're not feeling confident enough to do that, then obviously they've still constructed their sentence, which they can share with an adult or, you know, a peer. And then I've put another example on the left-hand side there. So these are our picture description cards. So who, what doing, to what, and when. So following, you know, the different colours for the different categories of words. So again, you can show them a picture, and then you can build up the words and get them perhaps to match the symbolised sentence to the picture, or you could cut them up again to get them to sequence that to describe the picture fully. So moving on to teaching of vocabulary. So for learners new to English, start with basic vocabulary like everyday objects, feelings, body parts, and colours. For those with more vocabulary, focus on subject-specific language that they might not know. So symbolised word maps or flashcards can help illustrate new concepts visually and give learners something to hang their understanding on. So we've got the AAC map there at the top of the screen. So we've got EAD. So it's not necessarily something, not always going to be sort of an AAC map in that you can create your own sentences from that, but it might just be keywords to support a discussion. Or if you're doing, perhaps you're doing an EAD celebration in your classroom, you could have that alongside so that, you know, a child could refer to the different symbols and to the language, you know, the keywords that they need or want to share within that activity. The pre-teaching of vocabulary offers learners a head start on upcoming topics, allowing them to familiarise themselves with vocabulary and concepts before the lesson. So we've got the opposites concepts cards there. It might be that you can print them off and have them, you know, great for sorting activities, so fast and slow, heavy and light. But as I mentioned before, because, you know, heavy and light, it's quite an abstract concept. But by having the symbols on the flashcards, it gives learners more of a context, more of an understanding about what those concepts actually mean. So those are great for sorting activities or having dotted around your classroom, you know, matching them as opposites and that kind of thing. Further developing language. So flashcards can be used by learners to sort, sequence or match. By adding symbols as an additional visual support, learners are not held back by their level of understanding of written text. This means that learners can complete the task with more confidence and independence, and can also share their understanding and thought processes with others. So we've got the healthy food sorting activity. So we've got the symbols on the right, and we've got the symbolized headings at the top of the sorting grids there. So it's just a case of them adding, sorting the symbols. But as well as practicing the target vocabulary, learners can also practice the skills of describing and comparing, agreeing and disagreeing, and opinion giving and negotiating. So they're all really, really good skills that kind of are supported by having an activity that they can access with more independence, because they're symbolized. And we've got there at the bottom the food chains, photo sequencing activities. So we've got the photographs there as well, as an additional layer of visual support, but we have got the instructions and the task there that is symbolized. So just having those symbols alongside your task, it really supports the understanding of the task and the ability to complete that. Whereas if you didn't have the symbols, then you might not even get as far as fully understanding what the task is or what the instruction says. But yeah, it gives a little bit more of context around those extra, around the activities that you're setting. Presentation of tasks. So use of symbols when presenting a task to an EAL learner can support them to be more independent whilst not reducing those cognitive demands. Symbols can be added to short pieces of text, instructions or questions, and learners can also use symbols to show their understanding or answer questions when they don't have the written language skills to do so independently. It might be that they do have the written language skills, but they might not have the confidence, and just having those symbols just gives them that extra layer of scaffolding. So again, there we've got the investigating exercise activity that I shared with you earlier, but we've also got a whole host of symbolized recipes on our website, which is great. So we've got the jam tarts one there. So we've got your equipment list. We've also got the ingredients. I didn't put that one on this slide, but I've given you an example there of the instructions to make the jam tarts in the form of a recipe there. So as you can see, even if you didn't fully understand the language, put the flour, butter and a pinch of salt into the mixing bowl. By working your way through the symbols in turn, it gives you a good idea of what is expected of you. So you might be able to complete that with more independence. Additional support. So it can be helpful for EAL learners to record new vocabulary themselves by letting them make their own word books or symbolized dictionaries to support more independent working. So word books and dictionaries are things that you would perhaps see in other primary classrooms anyway, but it's just having that extra layer of the symbols support. So words could be arranged either in alphabetical order or by topic. So we've got a word book example there that I created on our symbols web tool, with all of the things that begin with A, not all of the things, but a selection of things that a child might need the words for. And then we've got a topic-based one there with different colours on. So it can be that reference material for them and having the symbols alongside it. So they might have the symbol for, I don't know, an ant in their word book, and then the symbol used in their piece of work would be the same symbol. So it's providing that consistency. So even if they're struggling with the written aspect, if they had the symbol within their work and then they found it in their word book, then they could find the corresponding word to answer a question or to complete the activity. So the Twinkl Symbols web tool enables you to create your own bespoke resources quickly and easily using our range of over 150 templates and our wide range of over 16,000 symbols, which can then be downloaded and printed. And as I say, those I made from scratch on the web tool using a blank document, but there are hundreds of templates on there, so you can create things really quickly and really easily. And you can modify the text, and you can do all sorts in there. So it's really useful to create something more bespoke. Supporting families. So symbols can also be used to support and involve parents and carers who are new to English in school life too. They can be used to support communication with parents and everyday recording and reporting, including perhaps a symbolised element to school prospectus or welcome pack. You might have a symbols version for EAL learners, perhaps. You could create that on the web tool, or you could, copy and paste and things into other documents. Annual reports. So perhaps at a more basic level, you could share progress, things that the children are doing well. Parents' evening appointments, so having a bank of symbols, or perhaps even feeling symbols, so you can communicate how the child feels in school, how much they're participating, how they're feeling. With parents, communicating information around school events, so having symbols on your poster for the bake sale, or I don't know, the school trip to the zoo. You could have symbols on there, so that a child could share that with parents. But again, if parents also have English as an additional language, it can support their understanding as well. And homeschool diaries. So it could be that a child helps with that, so that they can stick in symbols of what they did that day, and then they could perhaps write a sentence with it, or you could use that to write a short sentence or two about how the child has been that day and symbolise it. You could involve parents and carers in their child's learning by sending symbolised word maps or word books and symbolised reading books home. So there's an awful lot you can do with symbols to bridge that home and school in terms of locality and in language. And it doesn't have to be a great big task. It can just be adding a few symbols to something that you're already creating. But it just helps improve the accessibility of something to someone that doesn't have English as a first language. But basically, symbols help EAL learners to learn in a communication-friendly environment, feel secure in listening, understanding, and expressing themselves, to develop their social, emotional, and academic potential by reducing or removing barriers to learning, and providing accessible learning for all. And as I mentioned before, symbols and visual supports are not just for EAL learners. They're not just for learners with additional needs. They can be really, really supportive in terms of learning for all children. But yeah, they just provide the extra layer of support for our EAL learners. So why use Twinkl Symbols? The 3 Twinkl Symbols products were designed to complement each other perfectly and make supporting learners across a range of activities and settings as easy as possible. We've hundreds of ready-made symbolised and curriculum-linked resources which you're able to print off at the touch of a button. If you can't find what you're looking for, then use the web tool to create a bespoke resource using our huge bank of symbols and templates. If you need that symbol support on the go, then our Twinkl Symbols for AAC app is currently available for free and can be accessed across a range of devices and operating systems. It's quick and easy to use and provides access to symbolised communication boards and books, a voice output system, and transitional supports wherever you are. We are working on that currently, and we will be releasing a new updated version very soon, so watch this space for that. And if you already have a membership, then you get all of these products for free, as well as all of our other fabulous Twinkl products too. So on this screen here, in terms of what's next, I have linked our how-to guide. So we've got how-to guide for parents, how to introduce symbols into your classroom. We've got our free symbols taster pack. So even if you don't have a Twinkl membership, then you can access the resources within that taster pack. And we've also got a blog post about getting started with Twinkl Symbols, introducing that into your classroom and things that you can do. So yeah, that's kind of the end of my presentation.